What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of Cards Hub 365. I'm Brenden Schaeffer. Along with me is Mike Claiborne of the Cardinals Radio Network. Claves, we do have some Cardinals roster moves to discuss today, but how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well, trying to enjoy the off day. It was not the most ideal road trip, but it's the first of a few. So, just get ready for Philadelphia tomorrow.
That's what the Cardinals will be looking to do. A pretty tough homestand coming up with Philly and the Astros coming to town. It'll be with a little bit of a different look to the bullpen. Just a little bit ago, I saw it on the Cardinals transaction log that Chris Roycroft has been optioned to Memphis. We've seen the Cardinal right-handed reliever struggling with his command so far this season, Claves. I'm curious for what your take is on the move. It's not maybe a huge surprise, but Cardinals finally starting that Memphis shuttle a little bit.
Well, you knew what was going to happen. Roycroft was the first. And as you mentioned, he struggled with his command. And this kind of goes back to spring training, where I didn't think he was as sharp as I'm sure he would want to be. And I think they thought that they could work through it. But, he had a lot of innings over the last week or so. He wasn't as effective as I think he would like to be. So they wanted to get a new arm in Munoz. Now, Munoz is kind of similar to Roycroft with regard to command. In spring training, his command was okay, but you could see why he had been available to the Cardinals. Now, he throws hard. I mean, he throws harder than Roycroft. Now, if he can locate it, then maybe you have a weapon. But this may be short term because of the schedule and everything that's coming up this upcoming week and beyond.
I think that's a good point, Claibs, as we're talking here on Cards Hub 365, powered by Gray Bar and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. The Cardinals do have an interesting situation coming up because April the 16th was originally that date that they gave for expanding to a six-man rotation that was to include Steven Matz. So could be a situation where you're getting that short-term option here with Munoz, get a look at what he's capable of doing. He's a converted starter, somebody that they're trying to get more of in a bullpen role. And as you mentioned, I believe his last outing in Memphis, he walked 3 batters. So similar to the command issues we're seeing from Roycroft. But I'm kind of intrigued, Claibs, by what that whole operation is going to look like. If they're able to expand to a six-man rotation as they have outlined, essentially, what does that mean for a bullpen that's going to lose a Steven Matz and suddenly you're down to 7 when you've got starters occasionally only going 3 innings? I just am struggling to see that math paying out the way the Cardinals are hoping.
Well, I think it does present a couple of challenges. I don't think there's any question about it. I really look at the fact that now that we are a few weeks into the season and maybe some guys can go a little longer. I think the bigger challenge is who in the bullpen other than Leary can go more than 1 inning. You're going to have to find some length in someone. And maybe Munoz is that guy, although, as you mentioned, he was a starter. They're trying to see if he can be a reliever. There are a lot of questions to be asked this week with regard to how this looks. But I really think more than anything else, this is a look to see whether Liberatore is a starter or not. I think this thing has been set up for him to be in a position where if he can actually start and give you length, that may answer a couple of questions. The other question is, and I think you touched on it, you're going to be a little short in the bullpen. And with what Miles Mikolas looked like his last time out, you can't have many back-to-back days where your starter can't get out of the 3rd inning. So it's going to be dicey. It's going to be dicey for a lot of different reasons. But I think it's more short-term to see what you're going to have and maybe need for the future.
And Samuel asked here in the live chat about no one really knowing. It's not official that it's Roderick Munoz, but it has been reported by Katie Wu of The Athletic that he's going to be the corresponding move for sending down Roycroft. So you've got a tough Philly lineup over the weekend. See if Munoz can play in those spots. But then as you get into next week, I feel like I'm still a little bit skeptical that the 6-man rotation is ultimately going to come to fruition in the exact way that we imagine. It certainly could, but I think, Claves, one of the keys to that is your point about right now Kyle Leahy would be the only guy remaining in that bullpen that you feel pretty good about going 2, maybe even 3 innings to mop up some relief duty in moments where your starters don't go as deep. If they're going to go with this 6-man rotation, it feels very important that every starter is able to get their 5, 6+ innings each time out. But I also wonder if maybe the name that would have to be in the room for next week could be Gordon Graceffo, as a guy that we saw a little bit of in mop-up duty on Sunday. But other than that, I'm just not sure exactly the direction the Cardinals would be looking to go more long-term as they think into next week with this bullpen.
Well, it also sets up this. If you don't like what you see, are you ready to take a look at what you have in the minors with Quinn Matthews and or Michael McGreevy? There are a lot of different things I think you can get away with in April. I think if you start trying to do this in May and certainly June, you're asking for trouble. So this is more of an exploratory situation where this may last a week, 10 days, and you may make some other adjustments, but you have to know what you have on a big league level at this point. And while the numbers may not be stellar in Memphis, listen, these are the guys that are supposed to be your future. So you're going to have to find out whether they can pitch or not. And while the circumstances might not be ideal, neither is the game. You're going to have situations where you're going to have to do something that maybe you're not used to or comfortable with in order to be able to be an effective pitcher or player. I always felt like you're only as good as if you can show me if you can pitch out of trouble. You get to the big leagues or you get to the pro level because you show you have good stuff. The reason why you stay in the big leagues is the ability to say, when I don't have good stuff, this is how I can pitch around trouble that may be presented, either because I don't have good stuff that day, or maybe there's an error behind me or something along that line. Who deals with adversity best?
It's a really good point. And to that point, Mary in the comments mentioning that Rodri Munoz is pitching well. He's had to have done a little bit of that because he's pitched 5 innings, only giving up 1 run, despite the fact that he has walked 5 batters. So there's an example of kind of pitching around trouble. And we've seen from him as well, the swing and miss stuff. He's got 7 strikeouts. So the Cardinals may be trying to capitalize on a little bit of that swing and miss aspect and see what he looks like in that relief role. I think from the moment that they got him from the Marlins, that was maybe the plan of, can this guy work a little more if we kind of simplify his pitch repertoire and his arsenal?
Well, there's a couple of things here. Cardinals don't have a lot of swing and miss pitching. All right, let's just be clear on that. We don't have a lot of it. The other item is when you have a guy like Munoz and you have to talk about the 5 walks, we probably ought to do a deeper dive to see when those walks took place. Were they pitching around someone, or was it a situation where, maybe he didn't have the control he wanted, but maybe he got the double play the next, you just don't know unless you have the real game log, which is what teams would have. You and we could probably do it, but it would take a little bit more than it being presented on our desk every day. Mm-hmm. So I would be interested to see how those walks came about and what the situation was before we say he doesn't have good control.
Yeah, and certainly the 7 strikeouts do jump off the page. I want to get your take on this comment and some frustration about Fernandez. Prior to yesterday, really had been dealing with similar command issues, but I kind of thought in yesterday's game, Claibs, to my eye, he had a pretty solid outing for the Cardinals, was able to get that scoreless inning. What have you seen sort of in his evolution? We certainly saw what he was capable of doing last year, and it's just been a little bit of a rocky start.
It has been a rocky start, and when you look at a guy who you pick up as a Rule 5 person, maybe that some of the things that we witnessed where he wasn't effective is some of the reasons why he was a Rule 5 guy. It wasn't like he was this high draft choice. It just fallen on tough luck. He had some injuries last year where he had to make some adjustments with regard to his delivery and just trying to find the right release point and just making sure his mechanics matched his timing is something I think he was working through. At this point, he hasn't been as effective as you thought he would be, but he has reasonably reliable stuff. And that's where I think the Cardinals have found a way to continue to show interest in him. Again, he was a Rule 5 guy, which meant he stayed in the minors a long time before anybody decided to give him a look, and it wasn't the Boston Red Sox. So, in his case, it's a very thin margin that you have on whether you think he can do the job or whether you think he might be a flash in the pan. So in this case, if he gets his mechanics squared away, maybe we get the guy we thought we saw last year. If he doesn't, then now there's another issue you have to address.
Because I really think they looked at him coming into the year as they're trying to figure out how to replace that production from Kittredge.
Yeah.
Obviously, they signed Phil Maton late, and he's been pretty good so far. But it all boils back to me. You look at last year's team, 83 wins. They were competitive, but just a little short of that playoff push. Their bullpen, though, Claibs, was very good last year. And if you lose a little bit of luster compared to that team, is that where maybe the margin, you struggle to make that up, I suppose, in becoming a playoff team if it's not quite on the same level with that guy that goes in the 7th and 8th inning ahead of Helsley?
Well, you have to have pitching. There's no doubt about that. But also I would keep in mind that I looked at Fernandez as being your closer B. On those days where Helsley had gone back-to-back days and you didn't have him available to you, you thought maybe Fernandez was going to be that guy who could come in and get you that 9th inning or a high leverage situation. He hasn't been in that position enough this year to know whether he can do it or not. And the assignment he's been given, he hasn't been as effective as he'd like to be. So again, it goes back to another situation. I don't want to call it dilemma. But I would call it a concern on what his role would be and who's going to be plan B when you have your closer down for 2 days.
And if you've got input on what that looks like out in Cardinals land, feel free to drop your comment into the live chat. Sports Hub STL is brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. And with the NBA, MLB, and all sorts of sports still in full swing, you can turn your sports knowledge into cash today. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly with just a $5 entry on DraftKings Pick 6, which is now available in Missouri. So download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code STL Sports. That's STL Sports right there on your screen for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Now, Clay, but I want to ask you one more relief question before we get into a little bit of what the rotation is going to look like this weekend for St. Louis. Jojo Romero, what's your stance on him? Again, another guy that maybe started a little bit slow, but I think we're starting to see him come around.
Well, Jojo's been effective. Jojo's one of those guys to me where if you put out in front of him, and I'm sure he plays along at home or what his lane's going to look like, he's been pretty effective. Question is JoJo a guy that's going to be as effective on day 2 as he was game 1? Listen, you're going to have to find guys who are going to have to learn how to pitch on back-to-back days. Okay, the bullpen only has 8 people, so you can't use a guy every other day. You got to find a way in certain situations to bring a guy back depending on his pitch count for sure. But so far, I think he's been okay with regard to the role he's been assigned. And I think the question is, with him, John King, and we don't know if Liberatore stays in the rotation and Matt stays in the rotation. You're gonna have to find somebody else, one more lefty, to kind of bridge that gap between a 1-inning guy or 1 2/3 guy and maybe a 2-inning guy. And the way Ollie manages, he tries to find that lane matchup where you're going to see more than one lefty, in an inning, or force the manager of the opposition to make some uncomfortable adjustments with his roster. So it's really kind of the ultimate cat and mouse game, but you better have enough pieces on the table in order to make that work.
Yeah, and you mentioned that becomes even more of a factor if you are going to a 6-man rotation. No longer do you have 8 out in the bullpen. It then gets cut down to 7. John King, the other lefty out there, has been a little bit rocky in the early going too. So we'll see the way the Cardinals want to approach this. I wonder how much the situation surrounding Miles Mikolas maybe has to do with it and plays into it, Claibs. He's one of those guys that in a recent outing wasn't able to get you very deep, and so suddenly you're looking to that bullpen to cover additional innings. He faced a pretty good lineup in the Boston Red Sox and got hit around. His first start was pretty good against what you would consider to be a lesser lineup. Now it's the Phillies that he'll face on Saturday, another one of those playoff caliber units. What are you looking for from Miles Mikolas in this one? And maybe more importantly, what do you think the Cardinals are looking for as they factor all of these decisions into how they get through their innings if they do decide to go to a 6-man? Because I feel like he is a key cog in that, someone they need to get deeper into ball games more consistently.
Well, yeah, you're right. Deeper into ball games, definitely. I mean, you can't go 2+. you have to go at least 6. And the way they've tried to use him, they let him go through the order at least twice. That third time around, he's been hit around a little bit. So the question is it more of a timing issue where it's mentally saying, okay, these guys have seen me twice. What do I have in store that I can get people out with for that third time around, at least to get my guys to the 7th inning and let them cover the back end? That I think is the real challenge for him. I don't think that the Cardinals are going to be in a position where the leash is going to be long here, because now this is spilling over into a second season. So you have to think about what would be your options should he not be able to give you quality innings every night he goes out there. The Boston situation you touched on, a tough lineup, but I got news for you. Philadelphia can swing the bat as well as anyone.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't get any easier. So you're in a situation now where if it's a short leash and you're short in the bullpen already, that may change how you view things also. And it really depends. Gosh, you'd have to go back to or go to tomorrow night, where how far does Palante go? If Palante gives you 7, now you have enough backup to make sure you can cover Miles. But then you have to think about, okay, what's going to be next? So I think a lot of things depend on A, tomorrow with Palante and what he gives you, and B, you have 2 options here. You can go get Miles early and maybe burn up your bullpen for the next 3 or 4 days, or you just let him take a beating if he gets to that. Now, one of the things about Miles, and we talked about it ad nauseum, is he's a strike thrower. The key for him to me is once he gets ahead, they can't be swinging at strikes. They have to swing at pitches out of the zone and he's got to make them chase, or he's got to get more ground balls. Now, I know he's a fly ball guy, but he's got to be able to get guys out per his directive compared to them getting lucky. And there's a big difference. But I really think when he gets ahead in the count, especially 2 strikes, that third strike cannot be something that's in the middle of the plate.
And that's been such a huge issue for him. And Claibs, this is a guy that's been a multiple-time All-Star. And so it's not like at one point in his career he wasn't capable. But what do you notice in maybe the differences? Because right now when I see him pitch, and I'm just on my couch watching it, right? I'm not in the batter's box. But it seems like he's just got that type of delivery right now where it's very presentable to the guys in the plate. He's not really fooling guys, which can make it difficult to try to say, I'm going to make you chase a little bit off the plate for strike 3, because they can identify what he's throwing right now. It seems in a very easy way.
Brendan, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's easy to pick up the ball coming out of his hand.
Might be having a little bit of technical difficulties here, so we're going to try to make sure we get things up and running. But let me know, folks, if you are having any issues out there. I'll continue to kind of talk through this, and we'll see if we can get Claibs back. Apologies for the difficulties there. What he was discussing, though, I think is a really good point when it comes to Miles Mikolas and the way that it's just not deceptive right now. For whatever reason, he is not in a position where he's fooling guys. There is nothing fooling anybody, Claibs, to your point you were making there when it comes to the delivery of Miles Mikolas right now.
No, and how you fix that, man, I don't know at this point. I mean, he is who he is. He's a guy that may be one of the best conditioned players on the team. But when you get to a certain age, some things just don't work as effectively as you would like for them to. I know it's early in the season, but you look at his situation and you say, okay, we saw a lot of this last year. We saw a little bit of it in the spring, but now we're seeing it when it counts. And while we can't just use the Boston as your only example, it does raise concern because, as we mentioned, Philadelphia can swing the bat as well as anybody when they're right. So it's something that we really have to keep an eye on. But again, you just have to make sure you have enough innings to cover in your bullpen. And if you blow up early, your bullpen's shot for the next 3 or 4 days, one way or the other.
Yeah, and if you're bending over backward this hard to kind of figure out straining to go, well, how do we work around Miles if he has another blowout? I think there is a point at which you have to say, what are our options here in terms of decisions that you can make? Because if you're going to a 6-man, it could just be as simple as say, I don't know what the effectiveness would be, but swap him with Matz and you can put him in the bullpen for a while, or you could go with a more permanent solution. I know that that's not something that we like to talk about, but at a certain point, Claibs, the Cardinals are in this sort of transition year where you want to get a look at the guys that could be helping you down the road. And I just don't know right now the likelihood of Miles Mikolas 2026 for the Cardinals. And so if he's not helping you in 2025, how many starts do you kind of let that go before you have to have that difficult conversation?
Well, you're right. And who's to say they haven't already had that conversation? Again, this is not something new that we're watching. But I really feel like he probably gets a couple of more starts. But, man, if you have a couple of starts where you having to go get him like you did in Boston, that probably decides the fate on its own. And I don't know what that looks like. Flipping him in the bullpen, I don't know if that helps anybody.
Right.
I mean, what makes him effective in the bullpen compared to being on the mound as
there's
decision to make for sure. But you can't let this season get out of hand and get away from you just to accommodate a guy who's been around and I know you're paying him and this and that. If nothing else, do you IL him and maybe shut him down to the point where maybe he can figure it out on the side if there is something to figure out? I just don't know if there's a good option here if he's not effective. Now, we're saying this on one side of the fence. Miles Mikolas probably says, you know what, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to be better than I was in Boston. And he can be that guy. Now, what does that look like? Is that 5 innings? Is that 2 lanes? Is that two trips in the batter's box? Or is it 6? Is it 6 2/3? I mean, there's a lot of different ways this can look, but you can't have 2+ innings and think that this is going to be a good thing.
It feels like Oliver Marmol putting that best defense behind him that he can on Saturday and saying, Miles, if you're going to pitch to some contact, let's try to support you. And it may go either direction. Like you said, he's more than capable of bringing it back. But if it doesn't, we're getting to that point where you go, this is a really important start.
It is.
How you slice it.
Listen, you can have Ozzie and Pujols on the infield with him, and you can have a bunch of Gold Glovers in the outfield. When he gets hit, he gets hit. Okay, and I don't care what your positioning is. He's got to make sure he misses some bats, and recently he hasn't. And if he doesn't, then again you're going to have an issue to address.
I want to ask you, Claibs, switching gears a little bit about the lineup. Obviously, yesterday was kind of the first day we didn't see it clicking, but to see the way that they started the season, I believe they were 1 game away from tying a National League record, starting the year with 4+ runs in every game played. They did it 11 times. Obviously, they snapped the streak yesterday. But in terms of an on-the-whole perspective, how have you viewed the lineup to this point in the season and the way that they've maybe improved their approach compared to last year?
I like it. And this is a lineup where Contreras has yet to hit. And one of the things, and I'm planning on talking to Ali about this tomorrow, you can probably name the games on 2 hands and a foot on when everyone in the lineup is clicking at the same time. It's just so hard. And clicking doesn't always mean, a guy going 4 for 4. There's some guys who are seeing the ball well and they're making good contact, but it's hard to get everybody on the same page. Recently we had that. And now Brendan Donovan's picking up the slack. I mean, he's been red hot. Mason Wynn had a pretty good road trip. So now you get them going. Lars Nootbaar's cooled off a little bit. Contreras is still fighting it. Jordan Walker has found a way to be relevant. So, you have enough guys who have found some reasonable consistency that gives you better hope than what you had last year where, as we used to say in the little leagues, when there was 2 out and a certain guy would come to the plate, you go get your glove because you knew you were about to go back out in the field because you had no confidence that this was going to happen. And when you think about what you're getting from the catching position, whether it was Herrera's bat and now Pages' bat, and what he's been able to do in timely situations, that's a plus. So, and then Pozo in his first game hits a home run. So you're getting contributions from virtually everyone, which is something you didn't get last year. And again, somebody's going to cool off, and then somebody's going to get hot. The key is if you can get 5 of the 9 to get you in a good position, especially with runners in scoring position, you take your chances.
Claibs, want to get you out of here on this thought. A little bit of a helicopter view here. The NL Central, we often kind of come into most seasons going, it's a weaker division. This is up for grabs for anybody. Has anything surprised you about the division on the whole so far? We've obviously only got to look at the Pirates, but the Cubs look to be pretty competitive. The Brewers are going to be in that range. Cardinals are just below 500. They're not out of anything by any stretch, but your impressions, I suppose, of the division in the early going.
It's not really a surprise. As you mentioned, it's early. I guess if anything, I'm a little surprised that Cincinnati hasn't scored a little bit more. I mean, the pitching, obviously starting with Hunter Green, has been very good, but they haven't scored, especially in a ballpark where they should be able to do some damage. And you look at their lineup, it's not a bad lineup. I'm a little surprised at that. But everybody else in where they're at right now, I'm really not overwhelmed. We thought the Cubs would be okay. I like their starting pitching. My question is Ryan Presley really the closer that you need to have in Chicago? Their offense has been pretty good. Kyle Tucker's gotten off to a good start. So they're probably where I thought most people thought they would be. You mentioned the Cardinals under 500, but has been competitive in virtually every game with the exception of the Sunday night game in Boston. So that's a plus as far as I'm concerned. Milwaukee, I'm not surprised at where Milwaukee is. They lost some really good pieces to their puzzle, and they're trying to figure it out with some younger players, and that might turn out to be okay. If they can keep Christian Yelich healthy, who knows what they can do. A lot of names that you probably haven't considered household yet, but, they find a way to remain competitive, and we just saw Pittsburgh, who's going to have a problem scoring. The Cruz adjustment in center field is one that's going to take probably 3/4 of the season. And what does that mean to some other guys? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But in that small sample size we saw against the Pirates, they're having problems scoring runs. But if you look around baseball, Brendan, either teams are getting blown out or teams are eking wins out. 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, and then you flip the switch and somebody's scoring 8 or 9 runs or somebody goes double digit. It's just what we call April, where there's no real consistency. And it's what I call not just April Fools, it's a fool's month if you think your team is going to look like this for the remainder of the year.
It's a really good point. We'll see where the Cardinals end up stacking up. They'll see those Brewers later on in the month of April, but before they get to that point, this won't be an easy stretch. You got Phillies, you got Houston, you got the Mets. So we'll see if the Cardinals can continue to play that competitive level of baseball and maybe end up on the right side more so than the wrong side. Claibs, any parting thoughts before we get out of here on Card Sub 365 powered by Graybar?
Well, I think this is a fun weekend to watch a good team in Philadelphia. You're going to see Nola on the first night. And, they have guys that can go beyond 5 innings. And that's one of the things that you really appreciate. I think Nola went almost 200 innings last season. He's always been a guy that gives you legitimate effort. And you would hope some of the other pitchers can take a look and see how do these guys get to the 7th inning? How these guys shorten things up for a very good bullpen. And maybe you take a page out of that. If it's a mindset, I don't know. But then you look at their offense and, Schwarber is Schwarber. You think about Bryce Harper, he's still an effective player, and they have some other younger players they're trying to bring along. This will be a very, very interesting test for the Cardinals and how they stack up against what I think is one of the better teams in the National League.
You know what's a crazy one too, Claibs? Former Cardinal Edmundo Sosa is batting near 500 for Philly so far this season. I don't know that many people necessarily saw that coming, but we'll see if he's in the lineup at all coming up this weekend. And Friday night, Claibs, I'll be in the ballpark as a spectator. It was great to get to see the presentation on Tuesday at the radio luncheon the Cardinals kind of talking about everything going on at the ballpark. I might have to check out that Budweiser Terrace and see what's going on out there.
$5 beers and $5 hot dogs. That's right up your alley. And along with some of the other neat things they have in the ballpark, as we were talking about the other day, it can be a real fun experience beyond the 9 innings of baseball. So I would just say if you're just Joe fan on Friday night, take a walk around, and maybe we'll have your evaluation on some of the places you stopped off that maybe people are familiar with or haven't had a chance to go to yet.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You'll definitely find me out in the Budweiser Terrace Friday with some of those happy hour specials all game long every Friday this season. You can't really go wrong with that. So leave it to me to be there for the very first Friday of the summer.
Friday night, we have John Mozeliak is going to join us from live at Lowe's. So we'll have a chance to talk to him a little bit as he starts to, well, I don't say he's winding things down. There's a lot of baseball to go. But we'll have him on our post-game show on Friday night. So a lot of good stuff going on that front. But, yeah, come on out to the ballpark. Weather should be pretty good, and we'll have a good team. At least this team, fans will recognize Schwarber and Harper and some of their other really good players, Real Muto. They'll recognize them compared to the Twins and the Angels, where Mike Trout was the only guy most people even knew about when it came to those two teams.
Yeah, on both teams, other than maybe Harrison Bader in that first series.
Yeah,
I think
Bader,
that's
of course, yeah.
Some recognizable names, though, on this Phillies team. And then, yeah, the postgame over at Live at Lowe's should be pretty good as well. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Cards Up 365, powered by Gray Bar and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm Brenden Schaeffer for Mike Claiborne. Make sure you stay tuned to Sports Hub STL for all of our content coming up. And we'll be right back here with more baseball coverage tomorrow.